I don't know. Sometimes it just feels like I'm watching a show every week. You know what I mean?
Look, we've all been there, right? Letting our fear and anger get the best of us, intentionally expanding the borders of the false world we created.
Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all this geeky pop culture that I consume and enjoy. Things like Doctor Who, things like Star Trek, and things like the MCU, which is why we're doing weekly reviews of WandaVision here on the channel. So do hit that subscribe button if that's your kind of thing you like. We're up to episode 7 of WandaVision now, which means I think we've only got one episode left. I think it's the season finale next week. That's gone really quickly. This episode was called Breaking the Fourth Wall, and it was quite obvious from the opening why. Because it's using that, we're up to this sort of 2010 style of sitcom now, and they're very much going in for the kind of Modern Family-esque, the kind of mockumentary style, where you'll have the scenes, and there's a lot of kind of like very handheld camera looks. Quick zooms is another feature of this style of sitcom. But particularly the moments to camera where, you know, we cut from like a scene to as if the person is being interviewed from that scene. Very Modern Family, very The Office, very Parks and Recreation, all very 2010s. And I've got to say, this has been my favourite of the sitcom eras for them to cover. I think I enjoyed this the most. I just, the style of it, I think I just really like this style of comedy and sitcom. Which is weird because I don't actually watch that many of them. I've never watched a whole series of something in this style. I've caught the occasional episodes of things of this style. I've seen like maybe 10 episodes of Modern Family, maybe a few more. I've seen a few episodes of The Office here and there, both the British and American version. And I've seen, what was the other one I mentioned? Parks and Rec, I've only ever seen one episode of. But for some reason, I really enjoyed this. Clearly, I need to go watch more of those style of sitcoms. That first opening scene where she's in bed and sort of realizing she's basically treating what she did last night, as in expanding the hex out, as something like a hangover. And it works just brilliantly. I love it. And the cuts to the sort of fourth wall breaking interviews would just time so perfectly. They mimic the style of, they've done this throughout actually, they've mimicked the style of the sitcoms really well in this show. The sitcoms that they are mimicking, they use the tropes of them, they use the styles of them, they use the camera work of them so well. It works really well, but I think this one is my favourite. I did say last week that I thought there wasn't enough of the sitcom last week. It was one of my few gripes of last week's episode where I kind of missed it. They didn't do much with it. They did a bit of Malcolm in Middle stuff at the beginning, and that was it. But here, they kind of brought it back a bit more. And although a lot of it was interspersed with the big story going on, with Darcy and Sword outside, Darcy inside the bubble, Sword outside the bubble, they still managed to find time for the sitcom stuff. And it works. It just worked really well. So is that it for the sitcoms now? I don't know. We might not get any more. Now, given how this episode ended, given the fact that we're up to the modern day, basically, in terms of sitcom eras, there's nowhere really left to go. I think we're probably done with the sitcoms, and the finale is just going to be big, you know, save the day type stuff. Which is fine, and probably what should happen, but I am going to miss it, and I'm glad they went out on the sitcoms on a high. So we found out who Darcy is in the world of the sitcom when Vision wakes up in his field outside the circus, and Darcy is an escape artist. I suppose it had to be something to do with the circus, as the rest of all the sword base got turned into a circus, but I kind of really was hoping that they would reference her own sitcom past, the actress's sitcom past, and have her as some kind of waitress to reference her Two Broke Girls role. That's a sitcom I've watched and enjoyed in the past, so that would have been nice to have that little reference in there, but sadly they didn't go down that route, and I understand why. That it would have been a bit out of place with everyone else getting turned into a circus. She gets turned into a escape artist. She even gets one of the funny fourth wall breaking interview scenes before then Vision sort of mind zaps her and turns her back into Darcy again. There were some funny moments between the two of them while she was still under the impression that she was an escape artist, because she thought that he was hitting on her and eventually agrees, oh, fine, I'll go on a date with you. And that was all very funny too. Really enjoyed that stuff. Talking of the fourth wall breaks, there's an interesting one where, with Wanda, where the interviewer, speaks and says, "Do you think?" What does he say? He says, "Do you think this is what you deserve?" She says, "You're not meant to speak." And I don't think in those style of sitcoms they ever do speak. They know that the interviewer in this fictional fourth wall break thing doesn't usually speak. Is that significant? Is this going to be the big bad somehow? Is this going to be the voice of Mephisto, maybe? Possibly. Also encompassing the style of the 2010 sitcom is people having very existential crises. Things aren't going well in their lives. Whereas the earlier sitcoms, mishaps happen, comedy mishaps. People get drunk when they're not supposed to. Dinners go awry and things like that. That was the black and white era of sitcoms. But the modern era sitcoms, have people in serious relationship issues, having breakdowns and things like that. That's the sort of stuff that you wouldn't even get in the 90s, really. You'd get maybe like an episode of somebody having something, but you think of friends and things like that. They have tough situations, they lose jobs and stuff, but they don't ever seem like they are really suffering massively. But the modern era of sitcoms, people have mental health issues and things, and they address that here with Wanda needing time by herself, get away from her kids, possibly doesn't want Vision, wonders where Vision is, Vision hasn't returned home, those sort of issues. So again, a nice reflection on the sort of current crop of sitcoms. I also really enjoyed the stuff we got outside of the bubble, outside of the sitcom world. We got Monica going to meet... Now, this did confuse me a little bit, because she said she was going to meet her mysterious aerospace engineer. I think that's what she said. But we didn't meet them, or I don't think we did, unless it was that one army woman that she was talking to, but I hope not, because that wasn't exciting. I don't know who that person is. And we were teased by people that have said you will be wowed when you see who it is. Who is it? Who is it? We still haven't seen them. I was kind of hoping to get an answer this episode, but we didn't get it. So that was kind of, if I had one disappointment, I was really hoping to find out who that was this week. And I thought that the way they dealt with it wasn't, I don't think there was even a line going like, oh, our contact, our mutual friend, or anything like that, to indicate to the audience that that person wasn't there. Because I was left thinking, like, okay, is the army woman that she's speaking to, is that the engineer? Or have we just not met them and they've just arranged for this stuff to be there? Also, who are these army people? Do they work for SWORD? Because they've got lots of stuff with SWORD logos on. The space rover thing has SWORD logos all over it. A load of the crates have SWORD logos all over it. But the army people themselves I don't think had SWORD logos. They had another logo on their caps, which I didn't recognise. So who are they and where do they come from? And how did they, if they're not SWORD, how did they get the SWORD tech? So I found that a little bit confusing. But I did like what they went on to do in those scenes. The trying to force their way back into the bubble or into the hex with the rover, which doesn't work. But then the rover gets kind of half turned into a pickup truck and thrown back out again. And then Monica decides to just pelt it in on her own, force by herself without much protection, her way through. And she's, interestingly, she's wearing this kind of like spacesuit, but underneath the spacesuit, she's got this kind of like under thing, which does look very reminiscent of Fantastic Four uniforms. So again, maybe the aerospace engineer is Reed Richards. Maybe he's part of the program that developed this stuff and he's going to use it to go into space and get his powers at some point. But at this point, this is why I think it's Reed Richards. And adding weight to the rumour that it's Reed Richards, her sort of undersuit thing underneath the spacesuit looks very much like a Fantastic Four uniform. But she forces her way through, and as we've hinted at, and as the show has hinted at in the past, she's been through a couple of times that it's altered her on a sort of cellular level, and going through again, who knows what would happen. That's why she was wearing so much protective gear, that's why she was in the rover. But forcing her way through it has done something to her, because she has some kind of powers now. Her eyes are glowing. She can see the world initially in a different way. It's kind of all purpley, and which matches up with what we find out later, I guess, with the basement. That's all purpley too. And at some point later on, when she gets into a bit of a confrontation with Wanda, she does a superhero landing, and there's blue shoots of some kind of energy coming off her. So I don't think we find out what the extent of these powers are in this show, or is that going to be a Captain Marvel 2 movie type thing? Because we know she's in that as well. But she does get through, has these powers, tries to warn Wanda, has a confrontation. Thought that confrontation was exciting. The episode was really sort of ramping up with its sort of action here. One thing I can't believe I forgot to mention this, but earlier on in the episode, I'll go back now, I really liked how Wanda, having expanded the Hex, seems to be losing control of things. Things keep on reverting back to earlier periods of history and things. So the TV becomes from a flat screen to an old 40s, 50s, 60s TV, CRT TV. Some of the plants change. The milk bottle changes from a carton to a milk bottle. Those type of things just keep on happening around her, and she seems to be losing control, which kind of plays into the mental health angle of it. Also, from a wider scope, we think she's losing control because she expanded the Hex, which might have something to do with it. But then there's the revelations at the end, so maybe it's not actually her, and it's all deliberately done to mess with her. But Monica bursts in, tries to warn her, and tries to reason with her, and they get into a bit of a confrontation. Wanda is warning her, threatening her, using her powers to raise her up in the air. Monica, as I said, has some kind of powerful landing when she gets thrown to the ground. She lands in a superhero pose landing. That was all great. And then Agnes turns up. And clearly we find out here that Agnes is, as suspected, Agatha Harkness. And after luring Wanda down to the basement, because the kids have gone missing and that's where she says the kids are, reveals that she has been behind it all. And there's this temple kind of thing, some kind of shrine to something, which again, probably Mephisto. And we get this weird little montage at the end, which kind of flashes back to lots of the things with a new sort of cheesy theme tune. It was all Agatha, and we see this sort of like her manipulating events in each of the episodes so far that we've had. I thought that little montage was a little bit on the nose, but I kind of guess it fits with the TV sitcom-y trope theme, so I'll give it a pass. And then we get a post-credit scene. Have we been getting these all along and I've just been missing them? I don't know. Maybe I've just been turning off too early. Or is this the first one? It's the first one I've noticed. Post-credit scene, Monica is investigating an entrance to the basement and sees the purple vines. Again, purple, which may be relevant to what she saw earlier, that this is all Agatha's doing and not Wanda's. And then Pietro turns up and says something about snooping. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Who knows? The mystery of Pietro deepens. I think this was one of my favourite episodes so far of the season. On general, I say this series has been getting better every week. There was a little dip in the middle where it kind of was like, okay, this week wasn't as good as last week. But on the whole, this show has had an upward trajectory, and I've really enjoyed this episode. Probably my favourite one so far. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do in the season finale next week. Assuming it is the season finale. I think it is. What did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments below. I will be back for the season finale review next week. Wonder what's going to happen. I hope the kids are okay.